The all-new WMEG Radio.
I'm your host, Ronnie Lucas, aka Rashid, and we are here again. Let me just call out, this is WMEG in Baltimore, Maryland, is dropping this information to the listening audience. But we're here with Michael Cotter, and as I stated, I want to open the line, so if anyone has a question about any of these strategies that Mr. Cotter has made us aware of, call 443-267-6558. And you there, Mr. Cotter?
I'm here.
Very good, very good. So we'll just see if we get any calls coming in. I mean, you know, what you're putting down is just awesome. I mean, this is very powerful, very powerful. These things can empower communities. It can empower individuals, entrepreneurs, because I know for a fact that one of the major hurdles any entrepreneur is going to encounter is being able to get the funds needed to move their project, you know what I'm saying, to bring it into fruition.
And what I'd like to do also is make myself immediately available for those parties who would like to call in and they have a very specific situation that they're dealing with. I'm more than happy to address that as well.
Okay, got you. And I'll just ask my engineer, any callers at this point?
Yes.
Okay, and caller, could you state your name?
Hi, I'm Karen, and I've been in the food and beverage industry for over 20 years. I was listening to the program. Hi, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Pleasure meeting you.
Pleasure meeting you as well. I was looking into different employment opportunities and just reviewing how the pandemic has changed employees returning back to work and created a lot of new opportunities for people. Reading some of the articles in the Washington Post and other sources that are talking about. I just wondered, is anyone familiar with the services that you're promoting, and are you the only company that's been offering some of the things you've been talking about?
You sound a bit garbled there for a moment there. You said, is there anyone else that, and then I lost you.
The services that they're promoting, is there any other company that provides those types of services?
Okay. The services they're promoting, they meaning whom? My company?
Yes.
Okay, good. That's a very, very good question. There are companies that are out there that do offer an array of different services, but they're not as diverse as what we are. We're a bit more holistic, meaning that what differs from my company from most is that they're oftentimes a one-trick pony. They do one thing, or they specialize in one specific type of financing. Let's say it's merchant financing, financing based upon your average deposits. But that company that does financing based upon your average deposits on credit cards when clients are coming in is more than likely not going to be the same company that's going to offer you services for major project funding for $50 million. They're not going to be the same company that could potentially help you get a new business formulated, whether it be an LLC, a corporation, an S corp. They won't be the same company that can help you to set up an offshore account. So understanding the entire business cycle and what entrepreneurs go through, I structured my company to help you deal with each one of those issues along the way, as opposed to coming into a financier and they assume you already have those things done. Well, in reality, that's not necessarily the case. So we really kind of help walk you through the entire process to get you to a point to where wherever you are, from the very beginning to those clients who are a bit more seasoned.
Okay. Well, that certainly answers a lot of my questions. I'm thinking of opening a chain of schools throughout the East Coast to prepare students to work in bars and restaurants, but I've been held back due to lack of funding.
Well, certainly. Well, my suggestion is that you can most certainly send me an email, because it sounds like there's some other things kind of going on there that might be a bit more problematic, and we need to think outside the box here, and that may take some time. But let me give you my email address. It's mcarter, CARTER, at comcashandcredit.com.
Comcashandcredit.com.
Yeah, comcashandcredit.com.
Okay. Thank you for your help with that. I will be contacting you. I'll be reaching out.
Very well. Looking forward to hearing from you.
And thank you,
All right,
caller.
thanks very much.
All right, very good, very good. And I was just asking if they're in it. We were getting ready to kind of run down on time, but Mike, I think you did a very good job answering that caller's concern. Anybody else on the line? Okay, well, I'll tell you what, Mike, it has been more than a pleasure bringing you onto the show. I mean, it's just awesome. You know, the service, and you will hear from me, you know, as I've stated, with some of the things that I want to do here in here on the East Coast, in Baltimore and in Washington, D.C., as I was mentioning, making more entrepreneurs aware of you, your service, is so that we can engage. And so, again, thank you, and I'll talk to you off the air.
Very well.
All right.
Everyone have a blessed afternoon.
Very good. You have a great day. All right. Bye-bye. Yeah, so everyone, the listening audience, again, that's Mr. Michael Carter. That is an amazing brother. I met him a while back, and the information that he has, and the level of service that he's able to provide, it's just paramount for anybody who wants to function as an entrepreneur, anybody who's seeking funding. That is the go-to guy. I mean, he's really seems to have his stuff together. He's done his homework. He has the licenses and he has the experience. As he mentioned, more than 40 years worth of experience. So anyway, I'm just happy to have had Mike on. So what we're getting ready to do, we got to segue over into our next guest. And this guest also was on during our first broadcast. And this is Ms. Kim Brown. And, one of the key concerns that we have in the community is developing our children at an early age to get them to have the appropriate self-esteem and confidence that is necessary to take on the challenges that are out here for the world, and ultimately to become those business people and just good citizens who are going to make an improvement within our community and uplift society as a whole. So are you there, Miss Brown?
Hello?
Hi, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
I hear you very well now. So how you doing today, Miss Brown?
Oh, I'm doing well.
Very
I'm happy to
good.
be back. Thank you for having me back.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you back. In which you said that you would come back, and I want to do everything possible to make sure I could have you back on the show. So thanks again for making yourself available to be back on our show. So again, Miss Brown, I'll just give you I'll give you the floor. Go ahead and speak again. You kind of had to stop from where you were the last time.
Before I start on my subject, I wanted to say that I've been listening to the show each week, and there's been there's been so much good information shared. I got to make sure and reach out to the gentleman who has the cards with the African symbology.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was very interesting to me. So I like how we're talking about business in motion, but we can really talk about a lot of things that relate to that, and certainly raising our children and preparing them for their future is very important. Wow, Mr. Lucas, I'm having some trouble with my throat.
Okay,
Hold on one
it's all
second.
right.
Take a sip of
All
water.
right, yeah, but no, absolutely. What Miss Brown is saying is 100%, correct. And are you back?
Yes, I am.
Okay, go ahead.
Previously, when I was with you, well, I'd like to start out by giving my specs again, my information.
Sure, go ahead and do that.
My phone number is 301-325-6682. My business is educator, EDUKARE. I'm an educational consultant in the D.C. area. I'm a retired educator and administrator of over 30 years, and I really look forward to working with families and their children across a spectrum of school and education-related consultation services. Previously, when I was talking with you, we talked about removing barriers and providing support to help children be more confident, self-defined, and with intact esteem, so that their career choices could really be related to what their true skill sets are. And that doesn't happen by mistake. That happens by design. We connected the facts that the characteristics such as the high self-esteem, confidence, and risk-taking do set a child up for being very successful in their future and being able, with their parents' guidance, to select a career that's matched to their desires and their skills. And that certainly could be entrepreneurship. Of course, they could also go toward a satisfying salaried career. But we find that risk-taking piece, which comes from being solidly confident about your points of view and the fact that it's okay not to have things be perfect, that's how we learn and grow. With those kinds of beliefs intact, young people are more likely to try to start businesses by themselves. So how do we foster these characteristics in our children? Well, the last time I talked about the importance of supporting students and children when there's a negative situation and there needs to be punishment. There was extensive research I discussed indicating that physical punishment is least effective and often can damage a long-term relationship between the child and the parent. So seeking more effective methods such as the removal of desired items or events. You won't be able to go to that concert, or you can't have the car keys this weekend. Positive reinforcement and rewarding positive behaviors. There are other alternatives which will help establish trust, limit confusion about the parent-child relationship, and keep the child's self-esteem intact. So today I wanted to return to another major structure in your child's shaping, and that is school. Children spend about 30 hours per week attending school, and then there are even more hours dedicated to the homework that they need to complete. Now, the pandemic certainly brought education to the forefront in the homes, with parents being much closer to their child's education than maybe some of them wanted to be. But it also gave parents a chance to observe the children's learning styles and understanding some of the demands that could be on the teacher. And that's really good information to help parents
assist the children when they do need homework, and when they're meeting with the teacher, they've got a lot of more information now as they've watched the children really in the throes of learning, dealing with the technology and everything. I think it was just such an important experience. And like I said, everybody wasn't happy about it because parents were kind of forced to be teachers even when that might not have been their choice. But I think some good things might come out of that, and you'll hear more about that when I speak about the school choices a little later on.
Sure.
So right now I'm looking at what is the role of school in as our children are growing up. That sounds like a pretty typical question because, and I'm talking about K through 12 models right now. So most likely the answer is going to be, well, to educate. The role of school is to educate. And that sounds pretty simple on its face. But what does that really mean? I think most of us feel like the role of the school is to teach the academic information, the reading, the writing, the arithmetic. Well, now we've changed arithmetic to call math, new math, some very confounding math that I think some of us, when we try to help our children with our homework, it's way different from what we learned when we were in school. But at any rate, many of us believe that that's what school is about. That's what school is for. Also, some discipline, structure, but mainly the academics. So training children, giving them information so that they'll be able to get a job and be a good citizen. Initially, when you look at schools being formed in this country, citizenship was a big part of that. What were you going to be able to do for your community and your country? And do you remember, Mr. Lucas, we used to get citizenship marks on our report card?
Sure, I remember that.
Yeah. Yeah, they were by numbers, I think, or some of them even were smiley face, sad face, something like that. But those were interesting because mainly what the citizenship mark was measuring was how well we conformed. Okay. Did we follow the rules? Schools didn't really want you to talk much. You had to stay in line. You do what the teacher says. You don't really question authority. So a good citizen was somebody who really followed along and did what you were told. Not a person who was thinking independently, asking a lot of questions. That wasn't good citizenship. So really, if you think about that as a role for the school in our country, it mainly taught us to move toward large group conformity without very much individual attention. That was positive. Now, there was individual attention, and there is individual attention given. But unfortunately, because of the numbers in the classrooms, a lot of the times the attention is for negative behavior. And the attention can be punishment or paddling or go in the corner or that type of thing or go to the principal's office. So really, positive attention for individuals isn't so much the norm because there are just so many students and so many demands on the teacher. And then again, schools are measured by state test scores, and that really drives the curriculum and rating schools' performance. So schools are not always so much focused on the student as they are on the product of the score, which will continue to give them funding and put them in high regards in their community. But we shouldn't be losing sight of the child. That's what it's all about.
Right.
Now, that might really seem like it paints a pretty bleak picture of schooling, but fear not. It hasn't really devolved to the point where there's not some promising things going on. I actually am a product of the public school system, and I know you are as well, and I chose that as my career. So certainly there are people in the buildings, on the committees, who are making things happen in a positive way for children, understanding the importance of individual support, and then certainly schools are employ others such as counselors and social workers to address non-academic needs and so forth. There are many, many good teachers who can supplement their curriculum, and the focus on testing, we can kind of push that away when we try to keep our lessons interesting and exciting and making sure that learning is fun, because that should never be forgotten.
Got you.
Now, regardless of what the teachers teach or don't teach, whether the textbooks are accurate, and right now that's a big deal we're talking about, whether homework is done as it should be. The biggest impact for schools on the lives of children is not what most people think. From kindergarten through high school, research bears out that the biggest impact for schools is in the social arena. School teachers will work as hard as they can on the academics, but it's the social piece that really impacts children all throughout their school career. How to get along or not get along. You've got leaders and followers. They're going to be bullies and wallflowers, jocks, nerds, rule followers, rule breakers, and everybody else you can think about. And all these types of youngsters come together in that setting, and students kind of learn where they fit. They learn where they fit and where they don't fit, what matters to them and what doesn't really matter. Now, some students can navigate this well, but some students cannot, and some students get in so much trouble that they actually take their own lives. And suicide of young people is very alarming, and it is not going away. In fact, it's increasing. And when I talked the last time about the parent wanting to have a very strong and positive relationship with their children, a lot of students who get in trouble like that don't feel like they want to go to their parents. Their parents are kind of cut off from knowing some of those deep-seated fears and problems. And if somebody is harassing them to the point where they don't feel that they want to live, parents feel so bad when they say, I had no idea. But it goes back to what kind of relationship you're cultivating, with the children. And so that's why we're looking at ways to boost self-esteem, have a real deep relationship with children. Is very necessary and important, and there are things that can be done to facilitate that.
Very much
understood. And the same characteristics that we talked about that ensure that children are confident and successful, they're the very same things that help them navigate the school maze and the social things that kids have to deal with that really are going to tell how they're going to make it. I know we're going up toward a break. This is probably a good time for me to kind of stop with that. And what do you think about that, Mr. Lucas, about the social impact of schools?
I'll agree with points that you are making. One thing that just from my own observation and experience is I've seen kids. When they're born from birth up to 3 or 4 years old, especially those in the African American communities who grasp information very, very quickly. I mean, I can think back when someone are considered like these are little geniuses. Look at what they're capable of doing, especially the ones that have where the parents allow them a little more latitude so that they can develop mentally. But what I've found is once they get into a structured learning environment, that seems to be almost an impediment. It seems almost to be just the opposite from what it was intended to do, and that is to educate, to educe, to bring out the best in that child. And that's kind of my experience. And again, we are leading up to our last break for the show. I swear, time just goes by so quickly. So, Ms. Brown, if you don't mind, if you'll just hold on for a second, and we're going to take this break. And, when we come back, we can continue, and you can wrap things up for us. With that being stated,
all right.
See you on the flip side. And welcome back to Business in Motion, a program that focuses on business and entrepreneurship from an African-American perspective, right here on WMEG, Baltimore, Maryland. And we're going to continue with our guest, Ms. Kim Brown. Are you there, Ms. Brown?
Yes, I am.
All right. So hopefully my answer, I hope it makes some sense to you. Or
oh, yeah, it was absolutely did.
Okay.
I'm going to move now into the most obvious way that parents will attempt to steer the impact and benefits of schooling is by choice of school. And as an educational consultant, I have worked with parents based on their child's personality type, their early academic preparation, helping to figure out what best type of school setting would work for a youngster as well as somebody who might be at an older age, moving in from another country or from another state, something like that. So, of course, the major availability for schools across the country would be the public school system.
Sure.
And again, I'm a product of public schools, and I have a career. My career was in the public school system. So I'm probably a little biased, but I'm going to be very fair when I present these different types of schools. Of course, public schools are free for everyone, run by the government with state, local, and federal funding and mandates that have to be met. There's no longer religion in the school. There's no prayer, and some schools continue to have that national Pledge of Allegiance, but I think even that is fading a little bit. There's strict credentialing and evaluation systems for teacher certification. That doesn't mean that some poor teachers aren't there, because there are some who are able to slip through the process. The textbook choices follow school board decisions and from a larger body. There's lots of rigorous testing of the students on state measures. And a lot of times, unfortunately, that's driven by politicians. I don't know if you remember the implementation of No Child Left Behind.
Yes, I do.
I think a lot of education-based thinkers realized that added a lot of testing onto the plates of schools, but it made it very difficult for some other things to happen, and we don't want all the curriculum to be just teaching to the test. So the politicians driving education decisions is always a little problematic for educators. Your public school is boundaried by the neighborhood that it's in, and so if there's some other situation, some students are able to walk to it, but they may need to be bused, and that's free, of course. And then you can choose another school with some pupil placement processes if you want. When it comes to programming for students who have special needs, which is special education programming, public schools follow strict federal, state mandates and rules to test, identify, and then serve students with the development of a plan called an IEP. And I'm kind of just going into a little bit of detail for each of these school models, because we might have some new parents listening in today, or just people who might be making some decisions about their students' educational career. And I just wanted to include some of the details that people need to consider when they're thinking about what is a good match for their children.
Sure.
So students who need an IEP could be in their neighborhood school, or they might have to go to a special school or special program. But the public school is going to have a vast array of services for students who have special education needs. Public schools are run on site by principal and other administrative staff, and the public school systems do provide counselors, social workers, psychologists, school nurse, and could be some other different. Sometimes there's interpreters and speakers of other languages who work in the school to help families who speak other languages. So there's because of the funding stream, there can be a lot of resources available in the public school system. The leadership outside the school is regional and then central, with a superintendent at the helm, and parents are involved in decision-making through PTA and other parent organizations. And if a parent in the public school system does not agree with something that the school is doing, either directly to their child or to the body as a whole, they can grieve it through the school system and then even into the public court, since it is a public system. Some teachers in those school systems have unions. I know where I worked, we did have a teachers union, so that's a little different. Because when we look at the private school, you're going to see that there are many differences. Mm-hmm. Well, first and foremost, it isn't free. There are entrance exams, so everybody who wants to be in a particular private school can't necessarily be there. They carry pretty hefty tuitions, and because they're not funded by the government, they don't have to follow the state and federal mandates that the public schools do. A parent who is seeking a smaller class size, rigorous academic focus, with more individualization might be a parent who's seeking the private education for their child. There's also a feeling that the private schools are safer than the public schools due to a lot of the issues that are seen in public schools: dangerous student behavior, weapons. These things plague the public schools. But when you think about how the public school is set up. They are bringing in all types of students from all economic backgrounds, and so there's bound to be issues, animosity, targeting between the haves and have-nots. So those things will push some parents to think about looking for safer environments in the private school. Private schools tend to be more strict in their discipline, and because you were allowed to enter, if you don't follow everything properly, you can certainly be asked to leave or put out. So that's something that the private school knows. They don't have to keep a student in their building.
Gotcha.
Public schools, unfortunately, have had to add police to high school buildings, called resource officers, to help with the discipline and some of the dangerous behaviors in the public schools.
I actually have a question pertaining to the public versus the private school. Is there any data to substantiate which one provides a better education? Or is that just totally subjective?
Well, there are going to be a lot of markers that point to yes, and a yes for the private school because of some of the things that I named, such as the smaller class size, rigorous discipline. But when you say better education, it depends on what you're looking at as a measure. And again, I talked about the social component. And so later on, we will get into is a school effective for the child? And I think it can be based on what the family wants out of it. If somebody graduates from a private school, then goes to a high prestige or Ivy League college and becomes a doctor, then it may be said that student was successful because they started out with a good foundation in a private school. But again, being from the public school and knowing what can happen, a lot of the resources that a public school can have, I think that's a very subjective type of, question and answer.
I got you. Conclusion.
That would take us the rest of this show, Mr. Lucas, to talk about that.
Okay, all right. So we won't.
But that's
won't worry
a great
about
question,
that
and one that gets asked a lot. Again, there are some religious groups who start their own schools, and certainly the Catholic Church has their Catholic schools, and we think about that as one of the models of the private school, where they even go to Mass during their school day. So those are things that, the public school does not offer, and some people are seeking that. I think the private schools try to level the playing field a little bit by making school uniforms be necessary so that there's not so much obvious difference between how students are dressing. Those students have a way of showing their wealth based on their possessions and their shoes and all types of other things. So to some extent, the uniforms, and even public schools have started to use them, they help a little, but maybe not as much as some of the administrators might think. And I think still, even in the private school, you're not going to get away from some of the social issues that are faced in the public schools. And I think one thing that some parents are very surprised to learn, that because the funding stream is smaller for private schools, based mostly on tuition, the certification mandates are not as strict for teachers, and the teachers' salaries are lower. So when you talk about teacher preparation, certification, staff development, training, sending teachers away to different states or even countries to conferences to learn about educational philosophy and different educational models, private schools are not as able to do that as the public model, but certainly they can do it to some extent.
Gotcha.
The private school certainly has a smaller decision-making body. Some of them are independent schools, so it's just in-house, their decisions. And they can include parents in their decision-making or not. So the whole thing about the curriculum they'll follow and the textbooks they'll use, if it's a Catholic school who clicks into a larger organization, they'll have more guidance. If it's a small, independently church-run or privately run school that doesn't have a body around it, then the decisions are just from a smaller body.
Gotcha. Understood. And
when it comes to programming for students with special needs, it looks very different in the regular private setting. Because of the funding limitations, their service options are very limited most times. And they might have one or two teachers who can work with students with special needs, but mostly they can't deliver an IEP. they're going to give some accommodations, and that's going to be about it. And I like any parents listening to know that if your student is in a private school and has some learning needs, issues that might be different from like a learning challenge, the public school system is still responsible for that child, and your tax dollars mean that you can get testing, you can get a educational diagnosis, and an IEP, and those students can be served in the public school, your neighborhood public school, maybe like an hour in the morning or an hour at the end of the day. That works well with what we call supplementary services, like a speech, if you need a speech clinician, if the student needs speech therapy, or vision or hearing therapy, or occupational for fine motor, their hands, or physical therapy for the large body muscles. It is a right of all students to have access to those services in their public school, even if they're a private school student. That might mean going to 2 buildings in one day, or maybe you only go to your public school 2 or 3 times a week. But I think a lot of private school parents don't know that that is something that's available, and that it certainly is part of their right as paying into the taxes and, being a person living in the community.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And I have another question. This is kind of related to the public, private school. And I think maybe, both can coexist. Obviously, they already do. But, what I've always thought that maybe within our community, and again, I'm speaking about the African-American community, is that the majority of the students do attend public schools. Let's say once they're out, what do you feel about having a structured learning system after, once they get out of school? Because I know there are certain communities that is standard within their communities. Okay, they take advantage of what the government is providing, but yet they still have their own schooling that those students have to, they just have to do it up until a particular age. What's your thoughts on that?
You mean after they get out of their school, that they go to maybe a culturally themed school after school?
Yes. This way, and that more so being private.
Yeah, that's a model that certainly can work, and I'm getting ready to talk about homeschooling, and I think that ties into that because one of the popular models now for homeschooling is not necessarily just the homeschool all day, but maybe the homeschool part of the time. And if you come together in your community, there could certainly be an hour after school to address cultural and religious themes that the public school doesn't provide.
Yes.
And that's kind of a slightly different model from homeschooling, but what it does talk about is parents in a community coming together to fill in the gap, so to speak. And I think with all of the information about our backgrounds, African heritage, this critical race theory now coming out, this new information, it certainly is something that could be looked at to supplement and facilitate student learning around cultural and religious themes that parents are not seeing happen in the public school. And with that, I want to just say a little bit about homeschooling. I think that because of the pandemic, we've been thrown into seeing what it feels like to educate students at home, but realize that homeschooling means that you are in charge of the curriculum, different from distance learning where the school system was providing all the information. But some parents are really going to continue to homeschool now after the pandemic, just because they have a feeling now for what that could look like. But some other reasons that people might want to choose homeschooling is it can support children who have some learning difficulties. Maybe children aren't interfacing well with the social piece, or they're being bullied or something like that. There are some children who have fine art or music or other kinds of rigorous schedules that they are involved in, and they really can't attend school on a regular basis. Some parents just feel closer to their children. They want to spend more time with them, and they would like the education to happen in the home. And there are quite a few families who are involved just because of, like I said, with the pandemic. Some people are frightened for their students to go back because of the health concerns that we're having now. And homeschooling is actually the fastest growing form of education in the United States. And I think the other thing I want to say is that it can involve a tutor. So just because you homeschool doesn't mean you have to be the teacher as a parent. Some parents hire a tutor and the tutor does it, but the child is still in the home, feeling comfortable. If there are cultural and religious things that need to go on in the home during the day, then the child can be a part of that, whereas in the public school they wouldn't have access to that. There's a lot of question about whether homeschooling gives the social opportunities, and some of the research actually shows that homeschool students, while they might not have as many friends, they have deeper friendships with their friends, and they can better follow the moral values of the family because they aren't exposed to a lot of the classmates. On the other hand, there's been the opponents say that the lacking social opportunities for students who are schooled at home will have some impact on them as they get older, try to interface in the community with peers that they really haven't been, around, and then going into the workforce, will they be able to deal with just society at large? So those are some of the things that are talked about. But I think your question about an after-school model that kind of shores that up could be a really great idea for some communities. I see our time here, and I do want to make sure before I leave today that I talked about self-identity and students being strong in their own skin and confident, and how we can foster that. And so outside of school choices, looking at what model, whether it's a public school, the private school, home school, that you might be looking at, I wanted to just talk about a few things that parents can do. One is that in order to instill confidence and high self-esteem, that we can give more choice and control to students in the home. We tend to dictate and tell kids what to do and to control a lot of the small decisions that they could really be making. That's what we want them to do. And even if they make a mistake, then we have to be there to help them work that through. But that really, giving more choice and control will really help with building a student's confidence and self-esteem. And we need to make sure we give affirmative messages. There's a lot about affirmations with adults now. Look in the mirror and say positive things to yourself. But we need to be doing that with our children as well. We need them to understand what their attributes are, and we need to have them say their attributes, and we need to be saying it to them and about them. You're smart, you're strong, you're friendly, you're generous. So that they understand what things that they can give to a situation, to a friend, to a peer. I think that's real important. Another thing is that we need to open the lines of communication in our homes so that we have free-flowing dialogue. Certainly children don't belong in every conversation, but a lot of times we shut children down and don't really let their opinions be heard. And we need to, some of the ways we can do that is to communicate with them more when we're watching TV, movies together, discuss the plot, discuss the character choices, ask them what they think and listen to what they think, discuss trending social media topics. We don't have to hit them over the head with our points of view. We need to listen and dialogue and let them know that their opinion counts, and maybe they need to read to find out more about that. And if we fill our house with resources and model reading and understanding pros and cons and both sides of through magazines and books and things that we can have around them, it kind of helps to shore them up. We can trust them to make decisions and then be there if it falls apart. Not in a way to degrade them or say something bad, but just to say, hey, this didn't work out. We let you try it, and look what happened. Well, this has happened to me, and here's how I solved it. And just kind of be a partner for them, in that decision-making, in that trial and error that's so important for young people in order for them to, just kind of build up their strengths and their ability to speak for themselves. And then finally, I want to say, Mr. Lucas, that a real important thing, something that you do because you're on this radio show, is we want to take opportunities to help our young people be comfortable with speaking. public speaking, speaking in the family. My dad used to play a little game with us where we had to report on something to the family that we had learned about, or maybe it was somewhere we had just been. And I think I think a lot of our young people, they're able to speak in church, and it's a very good place to start. But we have to, make them confident and let them know their voice is important and that they do have something to say. And if they stumble a little bit, that's fine. But give them opportunities to speak in front of the family, and then maybe at a family gathering where there's more people, and so that they become confident about sharing their views. And those are some of the things that, in addition to being present and understanding what they go through when they're in school, having that relationship where they can talk to you, some of the things I've talked about here today will help us, just have our students be ready. Be ready for the world and be sure of who they are so that nobody else can make them into something else. If you're self-identified when you go in, you know who you are when you come out.
Sounds good to me. I mean, it's like very, very good information, Ms. Brown, that you're dropping here on the program today. I mean, it's awesome. Wow. And again, even though with this program, it's all about business and entrepreneurship, but what you were speaking of is very much needed, because some of the same attributes needed to be a good human being, to be a good student, are the same things that are needed to becoming an entrepreneur or a business person. Or again, and not everybody is cut out to be, to own a business or to run. Well, not everybody wants to do that. You understand? And because if everybody did it, then who would be working for the entrepreneur? We have to have people at various levels. But what I am about with this program is putting something together and disseminating information and bringing on the experts that can provide information that is going to have a positive impact on various aspects of life. And I think there's no better place to start.
That sounds good. I was just asking if I could give my information one more time.
Sure, you definitely got that. Go ahead and put it out as to how the listening audience can get a hold of you.
Okay, I'm an educational consultant at educator. My number is 301-325-6682, and I can be reached by email on educator, spelled E-D as in dog, U-K-A-Y, T as in Tom, O-R-3 @gmail.com.
Very good. And Ms. Brown, I want to thank you again for taking the time to appear on this program. What you have provided is just excellent. You've been a great guest both times. And I don't know, in the future, if you want to come back, you just let me know. I might want to bring you back on and let you even do a little bit more educating, our families, our parents, and just the general listening audience. So the door is open for you if you want to come back.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, I've enjoyed it. I love your show, and I'll be listening next week for sure.
Very good. And, time just goes by so quickly when you're having fun. But anyway, we're almost at the end. I got less than I got a little bit more than a minute to go. And I just want to say again, make sure that you all are tuned in next week and tell everybody, because, again, I'm going to be going over the Sankofa Business Alliance, my book, Revolutionary Strategies for Black Economic Growth. And I'm going to talk about Afro-entrepreneurship, the importance of it, and how it can be used to start to develop our communities. And one area I really want to focus on is a locus of control. And what I'm speaking of is the internal. I feel that our community has become just dependent or people who have an external locus of control. And I want to do everything within my power to transform that so that we'll have an internal locus of control. And what I mean is the ability and confidence to make something happen on our own. And with that being stated, I want to say thank you again for listening to Business in Motion. It has been a great day, and I look forward to coming back next week. And I will end by saying, as I have stated in the past, that the heaviest burden anyone can carry is empty pockets.